Some say that the greatest skill that Roger Federer had was his love for tennis and the lifestyle that comes with it. Athletes at the highest level are constantly traveling and trying to adjust to new demands on their time. Unless they have great systems and teams, it can be extremely difficult to keep up with sleep, nutrition, and social connections. All three of these things can have a tremendous impact on the field of play. The aspects of life on the road often go overlooked by people who are pursuing their athletic peak. To better understand the extent that these outside factors can impact performance, I brought in Lauren Embree. As a junior, Lauren was ranked number 1 at every age division in the US. She's a 2-time NCAA champion and 5-time All-American at Florida, and was recently inducted into the 2023 Florida Hall of Fame. She left college ranked number 1 in the country, and as a pro, she was ranked in the top 250 in the world. She's played all around the world and has a first-person understanding of the challenges on the road. Since retiring from professional tennis, she's coached college tennis and now has transitioned her focus into functional medicine and nutrition, all aimed at helping athletes create better systems for their health. In this episode, we touch on what makes an effective coach at all levels, the challenges associated with going up each level of sport, and how diet and stress could be the biggest kryptonite or secret weapon for aspiring athletes. Lauren,
hi.
Welcome to the Exponential Athlete Podcast.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Of course. I've been really looking forward to this. I mean, you have such an awesome background in tennis, but also in nutrition and functional medicine. And I thought combining those two in the frame of what I'd just been studying with Roger Federer would be really interesting. Also, your personal story is fascinating. So I'm excited that we can dive into both of those areas and really find some stuff, hopefully, that isn't common knowledge to a lot of people.
Totally. Yeah, it's definitely a unique path. So I'm excited to share it.
Amazing. Well, so you've played tennis at very high level as a junior, arguably the highest level possible in college, and I guess as a junior as well, and professionally. I'm wondering, how does that experience change as you go up in level? What's the difference between being an elite junior to an elite college player to making in the professional ranks?
Yeah, I feel like there's so many steps, and every tennis player has their own individual path. For me personally, I felt like it was very needed to go through every stage just so I didn't miss out on a stage. Started tennis very early, family sport, played every age group in the juniors, had a lot of success there. Maybe had the opportunities to kind of bypass college a little bit and go right to the pros. But I really wanted, and my parents wanted, the education for me and also an opportunity to play for something bigger than myself, like play on a team and get that whole collegiate experience. So was very fortunate to go to college, and that was a wild experience, very different than juniors, which then turning pro shortly after that, got my degree, did my 4 years, had incredible experiences, and then going on the pro tour was also very different than the other two. So they each had their own like pros and cons for sure. Wouldn't change a thing. I feel like I learned in every step, I learned something different, but it definitely is like a process. And I'm really glad I just hit like every stage to kind of just like flourish me to who I am today.
I love that. And, something that I had learned from studying Federer is he obviously turned pro at 16, very, very young. And when he's going and playing in the early stages of professional tournaments, he's playing against full-grown men, full-grown adults. And although he might be equally as skilled, there's physical limitations of that. I think going to college, going through this natural or more natural progression is something that allows your body to develop, your physicality to develop in a very different way as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the maturity that I had at 18 and 22 is very different. So just like learning all of the things that I learned and lessons and advice and going through the adversity of that like pivotal stage in college as an individual, also as a tennis player, but most importantly, just as a growth, like as a human being, wouldn't have been anywhere near as successful if I would have missed out on that. So there's definitely like a maturity stage to that. And I'm just like very fortunate enough to have been able to hit those stages.
Well, let's go back to one of the earlier stages. So coaching is really important in tennis. And it's a little different in tennis than at least any of the sports that I've played, whether it's golf or baseball or now jiu-jitsu. A tennis coach is largely with you a lot more, and they're overseeing your career progression and even some of the psychology and all these different areas of your life. Can you talk to me about your early coaching and how that has stretched throughout your entire career?
Yeah, I mean, early on, my dad was like a huge part in my tennis career. I mean, it was just him and I and my older brother for years on years. We grew up in a very small town. So I was a little abnormal and I didn't like homeschool. I didn't play hours on hours. I went to normal school. So I had this balance. So I feel like my dad kind of instilled like playing other sports, like doing other things, having a social life, like having different groups of friends, but also tennis being like also sending the message of like, hey, if you want to be really good at this, like you have to hyper focus on it at probably a pretty early age, but it wasn't forced at all. Like I genuinely enjoyed doing that. And he was like a huge part of that. And then as I started to get better and have more success, like I met another coach who's a huge part of, or is a huge part of my life still. And she traveled with me everywhere. I was very fortunate to have her kind of on the road with me juniors and, to this day, like we still talk and they just like play such an influence in my life. And I'm just like so thankful that I've had like great coaches along the way because I know that's not like the norm for everybody. And that followed me throughout life. Like in college, I had two of the best coaches that I could possibly ever have, like highly responsible for my success. And then when I went on tour, I was fortunate enough to have a traveling coach for the first like year and a half, which like helped me drastically because you're on your own. So they play a huge part in your development, your success, your emotional and physical like being as well, your psychological being. There's just like they play so many hats. So it's cool like getting into like the coaching after that as well, like understanding that it's not just about tennis. It's probably more about everything else other than tennis, at least for like females and myself and like my own experience. So it's a big role to take. And I was just like so fortunate to have like unbelievable people in my small circle to just kind of like support me and like mold me into like who I was as a tennis player.
That's awesome. Well, I'd love to get a little bit more into the nuts and bolts of coaching and what that relationship was like with your dad. I think the vast majority of parents, unfortunately, if they're taking on that role, they don't necessarily do a great job. And it seems like your dad did an incredible job.
Yeah.
I would love to go back and if you could recall the conversation where you essentially decided to take tennis seriously. What was that like? Was it a conversation with yourself? Was it a conversation with your dad?
Yeah.
What did that look like?
Great question and moment. Like, honestly, they never put any pressure on me to, like identify as a tennis player or like pick a certain sport. Like by this time you have to do this. It was more just like a gradual feeling. Like I loved it. I never was like forced to be on the tennis court. It was like, hey, do you want to come out and hit? And every single day, like he was just very influential in the power of like being consistent with stuff and working hard and like getting to where you want to be. You have to maybe put in a little bit more hours than everybody else, work a little bit harder, wake up early, stay late kind of thing, because I went to normal school. So it's not like I had all the hours out of the day, but I do remember like 7th, 8th grade, just winning like some tournaments and just like really loving the competition part of it. And like asking my dad if I can play more tournaments, if I can like, my coach was in Miami, spend more time over there. I finished my high school like year online because I was like starting to play tournaments that required me to travel. So I was missing a bunch of school, but it was just like a gradual like progression to like, I'm going to just do this and take this really seriously because I had like really big goals and dreams. And I understood at an early age that, in order to like have a chance, I would have to like sacrifice a little bit, but it wasn't a sacrifice to me. Like I genuinely enjoyed doing it. And my dad, by far the most influential, best human being I've ever had in my life. And he played like a huge role into my competitiveness, my spirit, my character, my identity, the decisions I made, how I acted. Like I just had the best role model. So it was like almost easy for me. I don't know if easy is the right word, but it was just like natural for me to be like, oh, my dad's doing that. Like I'm going to do what he's doing. Like I want to be like him. So yeah, that just like is with me to this day. And I feel like that just started at like such a small age because we spent so much time on court together.
I love that so much. And it seems like he framed it in a way that it was your idea to continue pushing this, continue to going further. And I think the role of a really good parent / coach, different for just a parent, different for coach perhaps, is to create the scaffolding for someone to be able to succeed. But they have to, the individual person themselves has to be the one that's pushing and driving. Yep. The parents are maybe more of the the bumpers on the
Totally.
on the bowling.
Yeah. And like, I will say my dad was my dad first. Like he was never my coach and then my dad. And that's like a really hard relationship to try and balance when like you want the best for them or like you're in it with them. Like it's hard to manage that relationship. But looking back, I still like don't know how he did it. So like gracefully and just like perfectly and beautifully, because there's so much tension and like I'm super competitive. So like obviously I'm like growing and going through like a maturity aspect, but he just handled everything with so much grace and like patience. I think when I think about my dad, that's what I think of is like he has so much patience and he's no longer with us. And I just like think about that every single day of like, how can I be like him? And I was just like fortunate enough for him to be my dad. And the only thing he cared about was like my attitude and like if I tried hard and like my work ethic. Like he did not care if I won or lost. And I think that's like a really powerful message to like young kids and parents and families who like obviously put in so much time and money and work and just like, you know, everything into their sport. It can get like the lines can get blurred a little bit, but just like trying to remember what's important. And like, I thank my parents every day for that.
I'm so sorry to hear that he's no longer with us.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is we can still take those lessons, take those tenets, take all those things with us. And I mean, it reminds me of, although Kobe didn't exactly have the best relationship with his parents in the long term, when he was a kid, Kobe's dad told him, you could score 0 points, you could score 60 points, and I'll still love you the same. That's not going to change. And I think that is one of the most important things. I'm not a parent yet. I hope to be one day, but to remember that there are these two things. I know you said it's, you know, like impossible to know how he was able to do it so gracefully, but if you could think about it and dive into that a little bit, what are maybe some of the tenets that allowed him to be able to keep the parent and the coach role separate?
Yeah.
Because it can be a little dicey.
Honestly, like he just had a good perspective. Like he also understood the sport. Like he had played it growing up. He realized how hard it is, how hard it was, like what goes into the training aspect. He just had a great head on his shoulders and perspective around like what's important. And he wanted us to do things that we really enjoyed, and he wasn't going to ever like push that on us. My older brother, same thing. But he definitely like taught us some good lessons. I remember like when I was 10, I went and played a tennis tournament and my attitude was horrendous. Like it was horrible. I definitely had my moments because I was super competitive, but I just remember like almost like tanking is the word we use in tennis. Like you just don't try. And I did that at like 9 or 10. And I remember he like ripped me and was like, if you ever not try, like you are literally never playing this sport again. Like, I don't care if you win or lose. I don't care if you get your butt kicked, like don't care about any of that, but like you will not act like this. And from that point on, I just felt like that was the message I took with me for like my entire career. And I think it's what made me pretty successful. Like I wasn't flashy. I didn't have like a lot of weapons, but it was just like my heart, my feet, my mind, like things like that. And it was because just I had him since I was really small.
I love that. And I hate to keep bringing up parallels, but that's the exact same philosophy the Federers had. So both of Federer's parents, they cared how he behaved, how he handled himself. They couldn't care less if he won or lost, because what's going to matter more in the long run if you win like a 14U junior tournament, or if you handle yourself in a specific way or learn those behaviors in the long run. And also it pays more dividends. I mean, I could win some junior golf tournament. Doesn't mean I'm going to be successful in the long run. Maybe if I won a lot of them, but that's a little bit of a different
Yeah, it's
story.
just having that perspective. And at 14, 15, or even like 12, like obviously I want to win everything I play. I still to this day want to win all the time. But like there's so much more than just like tennis, right? And it's like about your character. It's about your integrity. It's about like how you treat people, being fair and being kind and all those things. And that was just like obvious to me. Growing up. I mean, I definitely had my moments, of course, but I felt like I didn't really like.
You didn't cross the line.
Yeah, I didn't really cross the line. Like I was super competitive and like I would act out for sure, of course. But like I could reel it in and like it was because of like what's actually important. Like tennis is a part of me. It's not really like who I am.
Well, there's pretty good science as well. I'll link the research study in the show notes, but essentially it suggested that rewarding effort over outcomes creates a lot better incentive structures for kids. I mean, it's pretty obvious. If you're rewarding the effort, that targets the intrinsic motivation. If you're rewarding outcomes, you're targeting the extrinsic motivation. And when you make things extrinsic, you basically make this trade-off essentially for money in the long term. And eventually it devolves into that.
Yep.
And then people don't do it for the love of it anymore. Like, that's one of the things that can, I think, suck the enjoyment out of a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I definitely had moments where I didn't enjoy it as much as like other times, but I just feel like that comes with like being a high level athlete and like sacrificing so much and, putting your all into a sport. Like you can definitely lose your perspective a little bit, but like, yeah, until I no longer had that, which I definitely had towards the tail end of my career of like external things, like you have to really take a look in the mirror and be like, okay, why am I doing this? Do I like it? Do I love it? Is this worth it for me anymore? And like, there's definitely ebbs and flows in your career when you have those moments, but the internal, like you have to want to do it for yourself.
Related to that, what did you like most about playing tennis? Was it winning? Was it the pursuit? Was it the community and the lifestyle, these types of things? Or was there something like really finite, or was it just the whole experience?
Good question. It's really the whole experience, but a few things that like I really enjoy that like kept me like motivated and going was really like seeing how good I could get at something with like the effort that I put in. Definitely like the training. Like I was a worker. Like I like to train and I like to like do hard things. So like just the challenge of that. But most importantly, like I love to compete. And tennis brought me to like unbelievable places around the world, but I also met unbelievable people. So like there's so many variables of why like I loved doing what I was doing. There's definitely cons to it as well, but the pros like for sure outweighed the cons. Like some of my best friends are tennis players, and we share these like commonalities that's hard to understand if you're not kind of like in it. My best friends, college teammates, best moments, college athletics, like best relationships, coaches and parents. So like, it's just, there's so many like beautiful things that it had brought me. So just kind of like a combination of all of that.
I love that. And I think everyone it's never just one reason.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things I've heard is Rafa. He doesn't love to win. He loves to fight.
Yeah.
Right. The fight is what gets him out. And obviously that's a portion of it for you. I think, for example, a Roger Federer, he loved the lifestyle. He liked being a celebrity.
Can't say that's in my top.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
But I also am not a celebrity like him.
Exactly. Well, but he also loved the travel and the experience and the novelty every time. The variety to him is like one of the greatest things ever, and it shows in his style of play as well. I mean, he probably in recent history the most variety on the court of anyone I can at least think of. You might know someone better, but
no, I mean the most graceful, unbelievable human being ever. Like I don't know him, but yeah.
So I'm interested. Obviously, we talked about the joy you have in it. What are some of the challenges, particularly with the lifestyle and traveling? Maybe after college, I think college is actually very nice because you have a team, you have this community built in. But going in and playing professionally, a lot of that infrastructure that you have disappears. For
sure. And I think it was just like the original like shock of that. Like I go to Florida, we win a lot. I'm on an unbelievable successful team with unbelievable coaches, unbelievable support. The whole community is like in on every sport. Like we're women's tennis. We're not a revenue sport, but like you feel like you are at Florida. So like you have all of this support around you. And then you go into this like very quick transition of not that. So it's a lot of kind of individual back to being by yourself. I was very fortunate enough to have a coach to travel with me, but it's still pretty lonely and tough out there. So it was just like the contrast very quickly. Like obviously I was losing also every single week. I was losing a lot more than I was used to in college. So just like managing that and battling that, trying to keep like a positive mindset. I think it's just, I mean, the tour is hard. Like there's amazing players out there and you're traveling, you're really uncomfortable, like traveling into different countries. Obviously there's a financial piece too. Like it's not like you're guaranteed money. You're really, if you win, you make money. If you lose, you don't. So like it's a week to week kind of like battle with that as well. So there's a lot of transitions. Now I wouldn't change it for the world. Like if someone's on the fence about like, do they want to play after or not? Like even in coaching, I was always like, do it. Yeah. You're like 22, like if just do it for the experience and like, you'll never be able to do that again.
You'll also regret it if you don't try.
100%. So like if people are like always on the edge, I'm like, yeah, just at least try, give yourself some time. Like a year, sometimes not enough unless you really know or have other things kind of like lined up, but you almost need like 2 years to actually like give yourself a chance. And yeah, there's just so many positives that come with it.
Well, a lot of the guys I grew up playing golf with, they were definitely better than I was. But I went down, I tried to play professionally, and I knew pretty quick that one, I wasn't good enough, but two, the lifestyle isn't something that I would necessarily enjoy if we're looking at it long term. I mean, there's a lot of travel. It's really stressful. You don't sleep in your own bed. You can't necessarily have healthy relationships unless they're, well, I mean, I guess, I mean, that is a big problem unless you have a sport where both tours, the men and women, are playing in the same locations very frequently, which doesn't happen in golf.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. And not in tennis really either.
Exactly. So. And so, I mean, that was a big bottleneck for me, is that, hey, I tried it. My friends that woulda, coulda, shoulda, like, I obviously know there's a very small chance, but that's out of my system now. I can fully focus on everything else. And I think if you don't pursue that, there's going to be something that eats away at you for the rest of your life, just thinking about, well, it could have, like
100%.
The meme is like the high school football player that blew his knee out, and it's like, oh, I was a state champ, I'm doing this.
Yeah, 100%. Even like, I always knew that was the dream. So I didn't have like the decision to make post college, but like 2 years when I was on tour, I actually like stopped for a year. I was like, I think I'm good. I stopped and was like really content with it. And then like 6 months later, I was like, wait a minute, like, I don't think I'm fully done yet. So I went back for like a year and a half. And if I hadn't done that, I probably would have had this like unwavering, just like guilt or regret of like, I didn't give myself a full shot. But now I can, like, people ask, do you miss it? Like, I have friends still out there playing, which is like unbelievable for them. I have so much respect to be able to do this for 10 years, like, longer than that. They have great careers, but I know that for me, that's not what I wanted because of a lot of those things. So when I was like hung up the rackets, I was like fully content with my decision and like looked myself in the mirror. It was like, if I can't go out to practice and like be 100% or be excited about it, or like be excited about going on the road, like, what am I really doing? It took me a minute to get there, and then like talk about the whole like post identity when you're done playing at like 27, 28. I'm just like, okay, now what?
Who am I?
Like, who am I? Like, my friends all have jobs and I'm out here. Like, there's a vulnerable, like, real piece to that too. It's not just like, oh, back to, like, now to the next thing. Like, there's a whole process from like a mental standpoint that I think tennis players struggle with that's actually not talked about enough. Like, it's okay to go through those things. Like, it is normal. Like, you've given everything to this sport, and now what? Like, you don't just jump into something else. So there's that whole conversation that you have with your head in your head. But yeah, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Well, when I interviewed Shane Battier, he said after he retired, his wife gave him 3 options. She said, you can sign these papers, you can go see this really like highly touted life coach, or here's a room key to the W.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
but I mean, there's this pivotal point after you retire, and we'll definitely get into what you're doing now and how you have pivoted in a very beautiful way later. I think, something that, again, going back to Federer, because top of mind.
I love how you're talking about Federer in my podcast.
Yeah.
Like, yes,
that's the context for everything. That is like my in into tennis. So, but something that he did unbelievably well was manage the things off the court. And he had a ton of help from Mirka, from his coaching staff. And he did also have unbelievable financial means at a certain point. For example, after he won, or he beat Pete Sampras in Wimbledon, that was really what sort of kicked things off. What are the challenges more specifically off the court when you're playing at this level, when you're traveling around? Could you sort of dive into that? Because I think people underestimate how much those things play into performance on the court.
For sure. And I think the longer you're on tour and maybe like not getting to where you want to be, like, in the first year, it can be somewhat not easier, but like you have nothing to lose, right? Like, I'm fresh out of college. I'm on a high. We just won these national championships. I'm like, oh, I just turned pro. Like, that's cool. It's fun. Like, it's fresh. You can do well. It's the next year where like you have to do as well or better to like maintain your ranking and to get in bigger tournaments. And I think some of the things that really starts to eat away at you is just the lifestyle. So like, if you like your routine and you like to be home and you like to be comfortable in the States or where you live or whatever, like, that's no longer a thing. Relationships, like, it's really hard to have like a quote unquote normal relationship or whatever it is, and personally, or just like a friendship, because you're on the road all the time. So, and then just like from a lifestyle standpoint, like health and nutrition and battling, like not feeling great. So there's like the financial aspect too. Like, as I got older, personally, that was always in the back of my mind, because I'm getting older. So I'm just like, okay, I want to be able to do this and that and have a place here and have a place there and, pay my coach. And there's like there's so many things. So that all can like kind of take a toll or like take up space in your mind when you're just like really supposed to be focused on like the match. There's a lot of things that can like really interrupt that.
Do you have a specific moment from your career where that really just hit home?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. I was traveling the first year and a half with my coach, who was like one of my best friends, big sister, like just a really great like person to be around. And I remember being in Italy. We were in Europe for like 6 weeks, and I like had just gotten out of a relationship. I left college, like just had a lot of new things happen all at once. And in turn, I think I was hurt. So I was like battling an injury. I was on red clay, like I was in a different country. There's so many things. I was just uncomfortable, and I just had a breakdown. Like I think I went like the whole month or the like 3 weeks at least not winning a match. So I just remember being in my hotel room, like in the staircase, just like completely losing it, like crying, probably calling my dad, just being really emotional because it had nothing to do with tennis. It was like everything else that was almost in my eyes, like falling apart. And it just manifested onto the court. Like there was no chance I could be able to, I could train great, but as soon as something went wrong or like there was some adversity in my match, which I felt like that was a very strong quality before, like what made me good, I no longer had that. So I would just like, I just felt like really weak and just really like emotionally like not there. Then you like hate tennis, and it just like manifests into all these things. And then you win a match and you're like, okay, this isn't that bad. So like my perspective was not that great. But it's because like I cared so much. Like I cared so much about winning. I wanted to be so good. Like I almost like took it too seriously. But it was because there's so many other things going on outside of the court that like nobody really knew. So it was all just like in my own mind.
Yeah, well, geography is one of the biggest things that makes it so perhaps the support network doesn't function as it used to. You forget about time zones. Well, it's like, well, it's the middle of the night. I can't call this person because they're not going to pick up. And it's again, these little friction things that add up. And the point of this podcast is to do the opposite, where we add up all these little positives to be able to get to this exponential place with our performance. But it 100% functions in the opposite direction. If it's death by a 1,000 paper cuts, where it's like, oh, the food isn't right. My body is not used to this. I'm in, you were saying in Europe or Asia before, and you're just, oh, I can't get the things that I normally get. You have, friction with relationships. You have all these things, and that culminates into
it just like evens out. Like I remember being in China with like 2 of my best friends actually, like, and so happy to be there with my best friends on tour. But we're in like mainland China. There's not a whole lot of access to like the things that we're comfortable with. And we were going there. It's like, oh, this one might be a little bit easier. Just like collect a few points. Like it was right before like I was on the borderline of like qualifying for the US Open. So I was like, let me just pick up like 50 more points here. Bad idea, because you're in like such a uncomfortable environment. So it all cancels out. Like I wasn't eating great. I was really homesick. Like it's really hard to get around. Like I couldn't understand language. It's symbols. So like there's so many things that it just canceled out. So I didn't do as great as I wanted to because of being just really uncomfortable.
Well, one of my good friends, he had a similar situation. That's actually when he decided to quit playing professional golf.
Yeah, I think I might have quit right after that for a minute.
So he was playing in Canada, and he's like, oh man, I could go to China. The fields will probably be a little bit easier. I might be able to get in. And he basically said to himself, and I don't think this was the case with you necessarily. It's a little bit different because you're trying to get certain points to get into whatever. But he's like, if I'm going to go over there to try to have an easier route, I'm just going to get stuffed at the next level. Exactly. Right? Why would I go over there? Why should I try to play against the best guys all the time? Because if I can't compete with them now,
never gonna be able to. Like, there's no shortcut to it. And like, there was a little bit of that for sure. Of like, that's kind of like a term in tennis is like, you can't go chasing points. Like, it's gonna catch up to you, But yeah, if you need like a few more before you get to a tournament, then maybe. But I do remember being there, and like my dad, again, being the most patient, like unbelievable human that he was. Like, I have emails that I just showed friends the other week of just like, all will be okay. Like, do the best you can. Like, making jokes about like, how's the food over there? Like, just like making jokes to make it lighter. And I'm like, literally, this is from 2014, 15. And like Father's Day, I just pulled them up and was like, oh my God, I need to like print these out because it just like got me through the trip. But yeah, there's like the whole, like, you can't run from things. You
Do
just
it.
got to like face it head
Oh,
on.
I think you print those quotes.
Yeah, I
Print
need to
those
get them
out.
framed. Yeah,
Exactly.
all the
Make them
things.
into art. Make them a
Yeah,
constant reminder.
exactly.
I mean, that's something that I've never done that I realize a lot of great athletes do is they just have reminders of things that make them feel a certain way or goals or all these things everywhere.
Yeah.
It's not just, you write it in a notebook. It's like on my mirror, it's on my fridge, it's on this. I see them everywhere. And I think there's something beautiful about those constant reminders, and having people in your life that remind you of those things too is incredible.
For sure. It's everything. Yeah.
So why did you decide to walk away from professional tennis? I mean, we talked about some of the underpinning things, but I'd love to get.
Yeah. I really think like took a hard, long look and thought about it a lot. I think the last year and a half was pretty hard. Just I didn't enjoy it as much as I did my entire life. And when I was walking on court, like not excited to compete because that was one of the things I love to do the most to this day. Like I'll go play pickleball and I'll be like, let's compete. I don't want to drill. Let's compete. Like, and I was walking on the tennis court, like not excited about it, like kind of dreading going on the road, like feeling like I don't really know where to train. Like it was just like a really kind of mess. And it wasn't fair. Like my parents were helping me from a financial standpoint to like be able to do it right. My dad was like, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it right. And I felt like almost guilty, like I wasn't fully in it. So why would I have them like pay for some of this stuff when I don't even want to really be doing this? And I had other interests. Like I got pretty sick when I first left college. So like the nutrition played a huge toll in like that. So I wanted to explore that. I got into college coaching. Like I wanted to give back and like be able to help like those female athletes going through those pivotal times in their career. Like I felt like I could relate and really like make an impact there. So there's a lot of things that I wanted to do. I also wanted to have like a normal social life. Like I remember telling like my friends, like I want to be able to plan something. Like people are asking of, can you come on this weekend? And you can't as a tennis player because you don't know where you're going to be. So that was like such a dumb kind of thought, but it was like, I just want to be able to like be like, yeah, June 27th, I'll be there. And it's like April and I can like plan that. Never had that in my life. So I don't know, just those things of just being kind of like a normal human and just like moving on and walking away from it. Like it just like was what I know, like what I thought I really wanted to do. And it was like, I don't regret it to this day.
That's awesome. And I mean, you had any stretch of the imagination successful career. You reached top, I believe, 200 in the world in both singles and doubles. Was there anything that you felt like, well, first, what do you think were your greatest strengths in getting you there?
I think it was just my drive, and my discipline, to just like wanting to always play tennis. Like I loved it. There was no like, most of the time I was not forced to be on the tennis court. Like I wanted to genuinely put in like a lot of work. And it was the people I was around. Like you don't have a great college career, junior career, even like somewhat decent pro career. Like, yes, I wish I was top 100, but like my junior college career, like you don't do that without like the support that I had. And it made me love tennis like to this day. And so just having like those people around me was why I think my career was successful. Like it was very, very much like a multiple man show. It was not just myself. And like, that's what sometimes doesn't get talked about. Like the community at Florida, my family, like my friends, like my coaches, like literally everybody kind of made me a better tennis player, but most importantly, better human.
I love that so much. And I forget who made the quote, but they basically said that if Mirko was not in Federer's life, he would have won at most half as many majors.
Yeah, it's wild. And like it's super important. And I think that was maybe like I had that junior career, like in my junior career, college career, like my teammates are still my best friends, my coaches I still talk to. And like pro career maybe like missed a little bit on that, but still like wouldn't trade it for the world because I learned some things that maybe I wouldn't have learned in college without it, Yeah. So yeah.
Well, I don't love asking this question, but it's out of my own curiosity. Because in retrospect, we can't change anything, but it's always fun to look back. Do you think that there was anything that you could have done differently that would have either led to more enjoyment of tennis or could have led to increased performance in tennis?
Yeah, I think from an increased performance in tennis, seeing the long game a little bit better. I think and that's where like college was unbelievable, but I also was really stubborn. So if I was more open to like doing some things from a tennis perspective, like tactical, technical, just like my own game, and being able to lose a little bit more on the front end to be able to maybe break the top 200 or top 150, like honestly, if I'm being like super honest, that's probably where I missed, because I was so stubborn. I was like, I'm going to play this way because I just want to win. Or like if I just took like those 6 months a year to just really lose like a lot and work on some things, like maybe I would have like cracked the top 100 or top 150. But I don't know. That's one thing from a tennis performance standpoint, that just like not being super stubborn, because it worked for so long to a certain point. And then like, obviously you get on tour and it's a different level.
That's a different game.
Yeah. So I think that mattered. But from an enjoyment standpoint, I don't know. That's a tough one. Like I definitely looking back, like the people you're around matter the most. Like you have to be in a good environment. It cannot be toxic. You need to be around positive people. I mean, maybe like when I was traveling, if I had the opportunity to just bring like a family member, just for like not even a tennis coach, just be like, if you have one person to choose to travel with you, like I would not choose a coach. I would choose someone that like is fun and like can lighten the mood, because we're already so stressed out, you know? So like, I don't know, just like a buddy almost. But yeah.
Well, that's one advantage golfers have, is at the highest level, they bring their caddies with them everywhere. And sometimes that can be an unbelievably good relationship. Sometimes it's not necessarily.
Yeah, I can see how it could backfire, like being too close. And like that happened to me too. Like I had a great coach, but sometimes like it's just, you spend so much time with someone, you know, so it can be tricky.
Well, I want to go back a little bit into getting worse before you get better. That's something that I've recognized in, I've only studied 3 of the greatest of all time so far.
Yeah.
But in every one of them, that something is very clear. Like Kobe Bryant, he would workshop moves all the time with his friends and fail miserably, but slowly progress into putting them into play. Tiger changed his golf swing 3, 4, 5 different times and got dramatically worse, and then eventually got better. Federer, in his late 30s, starts playing serve and volley a lot more. The sneak attack by Roger, he's coming to the net and dramatically changing his approach. Without a doubt, it's not an easy thing for them to do, but that sacrifice is something that I think it sucks in the short term,
Yeah.
and especially if you're not at the level financially yet where you do feel like you can get worse.
Right.
I wouldn't say it's as easy as just like, oh, I wasn't willing to give it up, because there are costs to,
For sure,
to going that opposite direction.
Yeah, for sure. Like mentally too. Like it's that whole perspective. Like obviously I was 22, 23. So like being 33 now, I'm like, wait, if I had my brain now, like maybe that would serve me better. But then you don't know what you don't know. So like, like, I don't know. Definitely would have helped, I think, on tour, probably college as well. But again, like because I had these intangible things, I could get away with it in college to a certain extent. And then it's just like a whole nother beast on tour. So I should have, probably looking back, got way worse before I got better. But I like wasn't willing to do that, obviously.
Well, the other side of that though is that, maybe if you weren't as stubborn, you wouldn't have been as successful. There's no way to know.
Yeah. And that's the double-edged sword. Like I do think like my stubbornness and my competitiveness and like my fiery, feisty, like intense personality on court. And anyone that knows me knows that I was like very different on court and off, not in like a she's mean and she's nice, just like she's really competitive and like she's locked in to like she's pretty laid back and chill and like, whatever. But yeah, maybe it wouldn't have brought me as much success if I wasn't like that. So I don't know.
Well, I think that having the conversation is important because
yeah, totally. Like I know that I should have probably done that. Like if I'm being super honest with myself, like I'm not going to be like, oh no, I definitely couldn't change a thing. Like I definitely maxed out to my game and I could have probably changed a few things and then hit maybe a different max.
Well, again, I think the conversation is important to have because the goal here is that someone who is 24, who's making that transition, they have that information to decide for themselves if what route is better to take. And that's what I love about doing this.
Like, exactly.
We have the wisdom of hindsight.
Yeah, exactly. Kids, if you're listening, and that's honestly what I tried to try and explain to the collegiate girls that I was in when I was in coaching. These lessons that maybe I didn't fully hit. I don't know if they took it or leave it, but I feel like it was helpful because okay, this is what I did that I think worked well. And this is what I did that probably I could have done better. And like, I see it in you and like, maybe you can try this.
Well, I love those types of things. It's very similar. I'd almost rather learn from the people that like didn't exactly get to where they wanted to go towards that end goal, because they have retrospect about what they could have done differently. Again, a Kobe Bryant's dad, he played in the NBA for a little bit. He went to Italy to play, but he didn't make it as a superstar. He had all of the physical tools, all these things, and he was able to instill in Kobe Bryant basically like, these are the exact things that I didn't feel I did, and now you are not going to make the same mistake because you have this wisdom that I have now. And not everyone has access to great coaches or to a parent that played in the NBA.
Right.
And again,
small percent. Yeah.
Well, that's, again, we want to make that as democratized as possible, because nobody shouldn't have access to information that I believe is useful like this. So you talked about passing information down. Can you talk to me a little bit about your transition into coaching?
Yeah. So I felt like I was pretty lucky and like blessed with how smooth it was. I was living in Los Angeles at the time and ended up just stopping tennis. The Pepperdine job came open, and I actually, this is a hilarious story, but I remember like writing the head coach. He didn't know who I was. He maybe just heard my name because he used to coach in the SEC on the men's side when I was in school. So like he knew of me, but he didn't know me. And I emailed him like 2 or 3 times, like no response. And just telling him like, I'm interested in a position, like just stop playing tennis. I think he thought that I was like not fully done with tennis. So he wanted someone obviously serious. Like it's a big job. And I was just like bothering him. Like he literally ghosted me. So Pear, if you're listening, like I still remember that. But yeah, he's like my second dad now. He's wonderful. Oh, but anyway, so I emailed him like 4 or 5 times before he responded, and just telling him that I was interested in collegiate coaching and would love to like meet up with him. Long story short, I had lunch with him and his wife that day, or like a week or 2 later. And the next day, he like offered me the job, and that's how I got into college coaching. I was brand new, fresh, like knew the tennis side, but there's a whole nother like level to collegiate coaching when it comes to like recruiting and knowing the players and like how many spots are open. Are we recruiting international, like budgets? Like there's so many things that I was learning. I was so fortunate to have, he is probably one of, if not the best women's college coach, women's tennis coach in the country, that was my boss. Like that's who I learned from, like first thing. So I picked up so many good things. And he created that team, and he molded that team to be unranked when I was in school to one in the country in 2018. So like unbelievable. They make Final Four every year, or quarter, semi, or round of 16 at least. Like he's done an unbelievable job, and like that was who I was learning from. So I was like, okay, I have the best like mentor almost. So spent 3 years there, and then like had a really tough time because my coach that I currently play, or that I played for at Florida, that job came open as the assistant. So when Roland called me, who is also like a huge part of my life, I've known him since I was 16, and he's done so much for me, and I played for him, and like we're just super close. So he called me and he was like, do you want to come work for me? And I was like, oh my gosh, like I have an unbelievable setup here. Like nothing is wrong here. I don't want to leave, but also like what an opportunity to go back to my alma mater. My family's now in Gainesville, which like I was not spending a lot of time with them because of tennis, obviously growing up. So I was like, the opportunity to spend time with my family, which in hindsight, great. I got those 3 years with my dad, like unbelievable. And just like went back and forth a lot. Like I told Roland no first, and then I told him yes, and I told him no. And I like felt so bad because I honestly didn't know. And again, moment with my dad, like wasn't going to make the decision for me, just like talked through it with me like over and over and get on the phone. Ended up going to Florida and had like a great 3 years at Florida coaching, where I played. Like that's really special. And understanding that that's not common, like that's not normal. That's not like, that's a very rare opportunity. So I tried to just like grasp all that. So I felt like before I left college tennis, I had the 2 best bosses that you could possibly have. And I'm like, how did I get here? This is amazing. I coached at Pepperdine, who I still like follow them, love them, still talk to him all the time. And then like was able to go to my alma mater and coach for like, he's won 4 national championships, like a very prestigious, like amazing, one of the best women's coaches. And yeah, I was just able to like basically like copy them and just listen in on things and just like grasp all the information I could. So I feel like in my short tenure of like college coaching, I got like the best of both worlds, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
I love that. And the deal breaker was state taxes, correct?
Well, honestly, like, yeah, try living in Santa Monica and Malibu as like a 27-year-old. Like, So hard. Lifestyle's great. Loved LA, but I was just like, this is a lot. Gainesville. I remember going to Gainesville and like looking at places and being like, are you sure that price is right? Like that's like triple cheaper than what I was paying in LA. Like, yes, I'll take it.
It's a legit factor.
So yeah, pros and cons. Make a pros and cons list. I'm telling you, it like literally helps you see things.
I agree. Well, I think something that I personally enjoy, and I've seen in a lot more people than I would have thought, is trying to make decision making as objective as possible. Mm-hmm. So there's this weird contrast in athletics where you have to have this unbelievable belief in yourself that is completely irrational. The best athletes have this belief, but they can also somehow also leverage data, statistics, normal like processes to create objective decisions within that weird belief system.
Yep.
And to me, that's like a very, it's paradoxical, but very,
totally,
very interesting.
So unique and so interesting. And it's so funny you brought that up, because that whole belief thing, I feel like, back to your question, like a few minutes ago, like that lacked on tour for me, where like it didn't lack in college for me because of the people I was around, because we were winning so much, and that brings confidence. And like, you know, I was just like loving life, and that made me better on the tennis court. And then like, you don't have that as much, and it didn't make me as good, but it's the just believing in yourself. Like you have to believe in yourself or you have zero chance.
I agree. And I think to refine that, it's okay. I believe in the long term, I'm going to do incredible things, but in the short term, I can be objective about what I need to work on. Mm-hmm. And that slight dissonance between those things is, I think, something that separates the pinnacle of the Mount Rushmore of sports from the people that are almost there, but there's something missing. And that is so hard. I mean, it's hard for me to do in my own personal life.
Right. Yeah. That carries on like in life. I'm like, wait, you're right.
So for those that aren't familiar, what's the difference between coaching in college and being someone's just tennis coach?
Yeah. So college coaching, I feel like, well, you're responsible for a lot more people, right? Like you're responsible for a team of 8 to 10. There's recruiting that comes along with that, which is like a huge part of the job, because that's your team. Like if you want to be good or bad, you have to be a good recruiter or do well or work hard at it or whatever. It's like managing teams, managing people, leading. Like you have to lead, you have to be good examples. And that's the same with an individual coach, but individual coach, you just have one responsibility, and it's normally just the player, where like there's so academics, like you have to make sure the girls are like, you know, going to class and passing and like doing the things they're supposed to be doing. It's also like trying to build a culture. Like that's what makes a collegiate team so good, is the culture and the leadership within the locker room. Like it has less to do with like, yes, the leadership of the coaches, but like if you don't have the culture kind of instilled in your program, you're not going to do as well, because you have to lean on other people and you have to play for other people. And that's a lesson that you can really learn in college. Like as a young, you know, freshman going to college that's never had to like, you know, think about another player or like share stuff, because it's mostly just on junior tour and pro tour, it's like all about you, which it needs to be, right? Like it's your career, like that's what you're hyper focused on. But in college, like you have to learn to be unselfish. And as a coach, trying to like teach that to some of the girls of like, in life, you know, this is like, these are the things that are really important. And if you do this, it'll manifest on court. And I think back in Florida days, when I was at Florida, like the coaches did such a good job instilling that in us. And we had that within each other, which is like, we weren't any better from a tennis player standpoint than anybody else, but we had this like love and trust and like safety net and like full on loyalty, which in each and every person, that like in those tough moments on court, when it's like 4-all, 5-all in the third, like I'm not winning those matches on court 17 in China by myself, but like I'm winning them at Florida because like I'm playing for something bigger. And that's the cool like dynamic of college tennis.
This might be a very hot take, but I would argue that being a good teammate is equally as important in individual sports as it is in team sports. And to clarify, an individual, you know, let's take a golfer or a tennis player, their team is the people that they surround themselves with. And, you know, in golf, you usually have a physio, you have a caddy, and you have a coach. Mm-hmm. And your ability to, and you have a partner, you might have family or an agent or whatever it is, mm-hmm. your ability to work with the people around you is very indicative of your success, and the way you organize that and the way that you maintain it. And sometimes you outsource that. Sometimes you have a performance coach or someone that oversees that whole system. Yeah. But managing that is unbelievably overlooked.
It's very overlooked, and it's everything. Like it definitely manifests in other ways. So, and it's, you don't have to think about that stuff. Like if you've got that under wraps and like everyone's just like in a cohesive, like strong, like culture, like it does manifest into like how you feel and how you play and how you perform and how you like treat people and like how you handle like things that go wrong. And that was a big thing, like in the college athletic space. Like, okay, your back's against the wall a little bit. Like, are we going to fold, or are we going to like be able to deal with that? And it's like definitely from a coaching standpoint, that's stuff you like work on every day. That's like those little details that really make the most impact.
Was that the biggest surprise to you going from being an athlete to a coach, or were there other things that were big eye openers?
For sure. I think really trying to like adjust my personality to coach each player a little bit differently, and understanding like not everyone is like me and I'm not like them, right? So like if I think something's easy for me, okay, that doesn't matter because I'm trying to get the most out of this player. So that was a big one of just like adjusting my personality and like listening to what they had going on outside of the tennis court. There's so many things from college coaching that I enjoyed, and it was the relationship of like me with you or me with this girl and me with this girl. Like I tried to have my relationship be different and good, like in every relationship, because I just think there's so many other factors that like sometimes coaches don't pay attention to, of like, are they stressed out? Did they sleep? Like, are they having a school issue, like family, relationship, personal, like college kids are going through so much stuff. So the pressure of it all. So just trying to like tap into that, I think was like, and just being like empathetic to like those things, I think can make someone like a much better coach.
Well, that's one of the things I think that in the modern age of short form content and media gets really lost in coaching. It seems like now it's easier to understand what a coach does if they have a very clear philosophy of, we do this, you swing the golf club this way, you use this type of grip in tennis, whatever it is. And I think the best coaches are hyper customized to the individual talent, the individual person. And to me, it's a very kind of sad thing that we're moving more towards, hey, you come to me if you like the model that I'm teaching, rather than I teach specifically what you need. And for the most part, every great coach I've seen is meeting the individual person. But it's, how do you sell that? How do you describe that? It's a little bit difficult unless you have unbelievable results, which the best coaches usually do.
Right. Then they don't have to. Yeah, you'll still go to them no matter what. But it's hard. Like that's recruiting, right? Of like, how am I going to sell Florida, or how am I going to sell Pepperdine? Which I don't even know if selling is the right word, because like I was so passionate about both of those places that I didn't feel salesy at all. But it's delivering the message of like, hey, we care about you from a human being standpoint and not just a tennis player standpoint. And like any tennis player or any athlete being recruited, like sometimes parents will call me and be like, how, like, you know, just for advice, or the process can get overwhelming and just like complicated if you've just never been in it. And I'm always just like, pay attention to the coaches. Like it has to be a good fit for you, but it also has to be a good fit for them, you know, and like the coaches and the players, like facilities are facilities. Like every place can have a great facility, and there's all these things like money now and facilities and like the next big best thing. But it really comes down to like your relationship with the people.
So for someone who is up and coming, they're either looking to compete as a high level junior or as in college, how should they be evaluating their coaches? So whether it's a college coach or whether it's a, hey, you're going to work with me on my technique coach.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a bunch of different things, but the thing that I would like, that would make the most sense to me was just like, asking the right questions. Like when you're being recruited at a school, like, you know, what's your day-to-day like your philosophy, like what's your coaching philosophy? Like if someone's super aggressive and super intense and like you don't do well with that feedback, like I don't know if that's going to be the right fit long-term for you. But just like, what are your goals? Like it's very much an interview for them as well as it is for you when you're being recruited. Like you have to make sure that you're looking for these things. You know, what's the culture like academics, if that's important to you, like do they have what you want to study, like basic things. But sometimes like we're very just like fixated on like, oh, this facility is great, or like they can give me this much money, or I have a full scholarship here. And like, yes, the scholarships matter, but in women's tennis you get 8 full scholarships, so money is not as much of an issue as like men. But it's just like asking the coach like how they coach their day to day. Do you do individuals? What's team practice like? You know, how are academics? Like what are the the rules like around the team, like things like that. Like some people are interested in like professional tournaments. So like what does the schedule look like there? How much support is around women's tennis? Like there's so many questions, but focusing in on just like the actual coaches and like how they coach and how are they going to make you better.
That makes so much sense to me. I mean, a lot of athletes forget how much time they're going to be spending with their coaches or with their team.
Yes.
And it's a really important arithmetic to do, to say, hey, I'm getting this much money. And absolutely, if the only way you're going to go to college is via scholarship, things along those lines, that's an unbelievably important consideration. Yeah. But if that isn't as much, indexing on some of these other things are, you're taking time out of the future if you're not going to enjoy it or if you're not going to get the most out of it. And if your goal is to be the best version of yourself, thinking about it through that lens might make you make a very different decision.
Yep.
When these immediate factors are less prevalent.
Yep. And I think the other thing too, when you're like taking visits, like I very much encourage like going on campus, because you will have a feel, like you'll have a gut intuition of like how you feel when you're there. And that's like the most tell. And then the second tell is just like asking the girls currently on the team or the athletes on the team, like what their experience is like. Like that's where you get like internal information that you might not get like from coaches, because they're going to tell you what you want to hear, most of the time. And most of it's probably true, but like you'll get like internal just information through just like doing research and asking the girls on the team and like looking at how many people transferred. And like there's a lot of things, but like going on campus and just getting a feel. I remember taking visits, and Florida was a great visit, but it wasn't my most fun. Like I had an unbelievable visit on another visit, maybe because I went with my best friend and we just had a really good time. But like if I was just looking at fun, I would have committed to the other school. But like there was other things like, do I have a chance to win a national championship? How's the weather there? Like, what are the coaches like? What's their philosophy on that? Like, what do the team think about the coaches? Like there's a lot of things where I was like, oh, that fits more for me, at least.
Well, your teammates are also unbelievably important. I think going around, I mean, again, not to bring up Federer again, but something that he had mentioned multiple times is without Rafa, he would not have been the Federer we know now.
Yeah.
Or even though he probably won less majors in the long term, he became a better version of himself or pushed himself closer to the limit. And if you have people around you every day that can push you in that way, I mean, it's pretty easy to tell. You play with someone and you're like, okay, they're going to push me or they're not going to push me.
Totally.
And that is something I've been thinking about more and more. When I play anything recreationally competitive, who are the people that are not necessarily going to beat me or be a competitive match? It's who have maybe that, like, I don't even know what I would describe it, but that factor that makes me want to get better. That is pushing me towards that forward momentum. For
sure. And like, I remember doing like some talk at Florida, and they were just basically saying like, that was the message, is like, how do you come out every day and do what you do? I'm like, well, we have Olympians on the swim team. We have Olympians on the track and field. I have like 8 unbelievable, like top 50 ranked women's tennis players here. Our men's team is unbelievable. The coaches are the highest caliber you can get. They just won the World Series. We just won a national championship in basketball and football. Like, how can you not want to get better with like who I'm surrounded with? Like the athletes at Florida and the community, like people came out and supported. And it was just like, that's just what we did, because I was surrounded by like greatness. And then I'm like, oh, okay, if I want to be good, I'll just like follow what Elizabeth Beisel, who's the Olympic bronze, silver medalist, is doing. Like they're everywhere at Florida. So that was just like an easy one. It was like, just do what they're doing.
And to me, that's something that is still continually understated. Everyone I've looked at, they go and they find the greatest people at the locations and they try to learn from. I forget when Tiger was at Stanford, he went into, oh my God, I'm blanking on the guy's name. He's one of the most famous, I believe, football coaches of all time. One of the most winningest coaches of all time. But he just went in his office the first day and it was like, hey, amazing. Like, let's talk. And they became really good friends. They talked all the time. Yeah. And it's like, well, winners can learn from winners. They're going to want to learn just as much from you as you learn from them. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah,
right?
No, for sure. We have so much in common. So like we think the same. Like my roommate, my 5th year was, she's like a New Balance track runner. So it's like, I'm living with her. Like, I'm gonna, learn from her and like soak in what she does from a training side and like from a run side. And like, you can take bits and pieces of like any sport and like just be better.
Well, that's where I believe innovation comes from. I don't think that there's truly new ideas. Innovation is seeing something in another sport, another domain, and finding a way to apply it to yours. Or that's where most innovation. There are some novel ideas, but very few and far between. And that is the closest tangible way to innovate, in my opinion.
Agree.
So obviously you had this incredible coaching arc. You're on a new arc now, which is directly related to the nutrition, the functional medicine, and also a little bit of the fitness and the training side. How did you make that transition? What was the bonus on that?
So kind of wild story, which not a lot of people know unless they were super close to me. But when I was transitioning from college to the tour, I was having like a lot of like health things go wrong. And like being a 22-year-old, like pretty fit, healthy, or what I thought was healthy, like individual, but having a lot of pain, like back pain, couldn't like wake up and like tie my shoes, like really swollen and inflamed everywhere, like couldn't really see out of my left eye, like that was being inflamed, just had a lot of like weird things happen. Now I know exactly what that was from, but at 22, I didn't. So when I was in LA, I just got pivoted to all of these, or I got thrown around to all these doctors that tested me for all these things and ruled them all, checked every box of like, she's fine. Maybe one thought it was Lyme disease. Maybe someone thought it was something else. And they were trying to give me like this medication to just like inject in my body to calm down the inflammation and the pain. And, I was on pain medication, all this stuff for all my injuries. And I was like, this cannot be the answer. Like, there's got to be a better way to like solve this issue. So got now pivoted to like a functional medicine doctor in Beverly Hills. And he did all the blood tests, the gut tests, the stool tests, all the things, and broke it down to having like 4 autoimmune diseases at once inside my body. So my immune system was just basically like attacking itself. Looking back, it was pretty obvious why. Like I was overtrained, my diet wasn't great. Toxic environment outside of tennis, change, stress, all overwhelmed, all of the things. So he went on his protocol from a diet standpoint. Literally, he was like, Lauren, you have to go gluten, dairy, egg free for 6 months. And I was like, doc, that's impossible. Like I'm literally traveling every 2 weeks out of the month in different countries. And he's like, well, you've like, in order to get this all calmed down, added on to about 15 supplements a day that I was taking for like muscle testing, all this stuff. And I just found it super fascinating because I ended up doing it. Would pack like food suitcases to like Europe and just eat really weird and kind of like, be kind of annoying to go out to eat with because I wouldn't touch things that were like gluten, dairy, soy, or egg. He was like, stay away from that. I'm like, okay, when you're in that much pain, I'll do whatever. You tell me. So it worked for like 3 to 6 months. Like everything got probably like 80 to 90% better. I had no more back pain. Like my skin cleared up. My inflammation was down. My eyesight got better, like all of these things. So I was like, functional medicine's it. So from 22, that's all I did when I was like traveling or, on my own. I was just like listening to podcasts, reading books. And that's kind of what transpired like my career today. But did other things, obviously kept playing and coaching, but like always on the side, I was doing nutrition and functional medicine. So that's how I originally like got this passion and love for it. And I just want to help people feel better.
I think that's so important. I mean, I can't tell you how many of my friends, they have inflammation, they have stomach issues, they have things and they don't know why. And it's preventing them from being the best version of themselves.
For sure.
And if you think about it from an athlete perspective, if you have all these things over time, that's taking so much out of what your potential could be because it's all these little nagging things that add up. And that's not how you want to. That's
not how you want to live. And there's just like not correlating the two. I was like, okay, maybe, but I ate pretty healthy. Like I exercise a lot. I feel like I could get away with a lot of things, but it's correlating like that the food is really the medicine to like life and medicine is food. And just like, okay, if you feel like your stomach hurts, you feel bloated or you can't sleep or you're super anxious, like let's look into what we're eating every single day. And like, there's a lot of power and control that you have with like what we put into our body as fuel every day. So that's kind of where like the passion went.
Well, it's interesting. I'm seeing that now firsthand. And I don't recommend this diet model or anything like that, but I went to the doctor the other day. I'm a little overweight compared to what I usually am. My shoulder surgery kind of kicked my butt, and my body responds really well to like a keto style diet. I've done it in the past. I feel really good all the time, and I realize it's like subjective. And so I started doing this the last 3 days. And my Whoop metrics, my heart rate variability, all these things are off the charts compared to what
Better.
they usually are. Yeah, really good.
Yeah.
And obviously that is custom to me. Not everyone
Right.
will feel the same way with these things.
But it's very individual.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking like a 40% difference
Amazing.
in my heart rate variability and some of these other things. And it's like, well, that's a relatively small change in one area of my
in 3
my
days.
life. Yeah. And it's like, oh my goodness, I also feel unbelievably different.
Yeah.
So
correct.
that we overlook it because it's just, we eat every day. Right.
Totally.
And it's like,
we have to eat to survive. So we got to figure that piece out. We don't all have to exercise, although we should, but like we have to eat to survive. So like figuring that out is important based on your own microbiome. Like you doing keto and me doing keto, we're going to have two totally different responses. But if it works for that person and you feel good on it, that's the most important tell. Is like someone can be like, oh, Lauren, I'm eating super healthy. I'm eating this, and that. And I'm like, well, how do you feel? They're like, awful. I'm really tired and bloated. I'm like, okay, that's not healthy.
Probably not gonna work.
It's not healthy for you.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, we're so programmed to be like, this is healthy, but it's not for you. And just like trying to help people understand like what's healthy for them.
I agree 100%. When I was talking to Andrew Herr on the podcast, he's like very focused on measurement and testing, and his people, they do blood work every like twice a week. They wear a fitness tracker. He's collecting all this data. And he said the most important thing was the subjective understanding of how do you feel and what are your energy levels like, right?
Yeah. Like all of the things. How are you sleeping? Like, how do you feel after you eat? Like basic questions that are very much overlooked. So yeah, nutrition's a huge passion, and I'm glad I'm doing in the field.
Well, let's dive into two subcategories of that. So we have stress and we also have nutrition. How can those impact the outcomes that we want to see?
Yeah. So cortisol, like our stress hormone, right? So our environment that you're around and the people you're around every single day can very much drive cortisol to be through the roof. If it's toxic, it can also do the opposite of like benefit you, which is why like trying to tap into those two things, diet and lifestyle, and stress alone can trigger a lot of autoimmune disease, which in my own personal case, that's what happened. Like I was so overtrained and so stressed out that I think that really turned on these like epigenetics for me to like trigger the ankylosing spondylitis and the uveitis and all of these autoimmune diseases I had. But I just chalked it up as like, oh, I'm just in pain. I overtrained. But like, and then I got out of that environment, like completely changed my environment and my diet, calmed down. So it's like so much correlated to like just trying to manage stress levels and then just trying to like understand, maybe eat a little bit more protein, maybe drink a little less, maybe eat a little bit less processed food, less sugar, like just pick one or two things to try and just limit. And like you said, in 3 to 5 days, you'll be like, oh, clothes fit a little different, have a little bit more energy, sleeping like a rock. But just like, yeah, trying to help people tap into those two things is like a great place to start.
So do you have any favorite protocols, particularly for stress reduction? Obviously, stress and nutrition are directly related in some sense. I mean, is there breath work, meditation, or is there something that's even...
I mean, yes, for sure. Like all of those things, the holistic things, but sleep, like sleep hygiene. Like if you're doing everything else, like you're meditating, you're eating well, you're exercising, but you're like not sleep, like you're not prioritizing your sleep hygiene, like you're just not going to get as far. So tapping into the sleep hygiene, like what time are you going to bed? If it's midnight, okay, maybe it's 11:30. Like very much believe that the consistency that you go in is way more powerful than the intensity that you go at and like the speed that you go at. So just picking one thing, like if that's it, that's it. Some people it's like their sleep's great, but their nutrition's awful. So it's like, let's have 30 grams of protein for breakfast. And like, you can keep the rest of your nutrition the same for the day, but like, let's just focus on this meal. Stress, exercise. Like, are you moving? Are you not even like scheduled exercise? Like you need to go to the gym and lift weights. It's more like, let's get 7,000 steps today. And that's like a huge deal for people. So like, that's a stress reliever. Seeing the sun, like, let's see the sun before noon. For 10 minutes, go for a walk, listen to a podcast instead of like scrolling on Instagram. Like there's so many things that's like free wellness that doesn't cost money. That's like, let's sleep well, let's move our body, let's fast a little bit, let's listen to a podcast that can like help downregulate these cortisol levels.
I think that everyone has low-hanging fruits that they don't even realize. Like it might be really easy for you to do something that's difficult for other people, but it just doesn't cross your mind because you're not conditioned to it. I mean, for me, I like probably maybe 3-4 years ago, I basically stopped drinking, right? It's not because I don't enjoy drinking or I see anything wrong with it. It's just, to me, that was like really easy to cut because I didn't get a huge return from drinking. I just like didn't love the feeling. It didn't help me. And the risk associated with like me not sleeping well, and when I drink, I get so fat.
Yeah.
It's I don't know if there's
well, it's just
like extra
dense.
calories.
It's inflammation. It's calories. Like then what are you eating after that? You're not sleeping. You're insulin resistant. Like there's so many things.
Well, and so it's like, okay, for me, that's really easy. For someone else, it might be unbelievably difficult. For someone to cut pizza, it might be super easy. For me, unbelievably difficult.
Yeah.
Right. And so I should take those low hanging fruits, as many of them as I can. And I'll probably get somewhere.
For sure.
And almost everyone has them where you have those trade-offs where you don't even think about it.
Correct. Just trying to pick one thing and just do that for 3 weeks, just pick one thing and just like build from there instead of being like, I'm going to do this, this, and this tomorrow. Like you're not, we're very much creatures of habit. So yeah, just starting small, like just building and like being proud of that.
Well, let's dig into nutrition as well a little bit. Is there anything that athletes, for the most part, might be consistently overlooking? I also want to make it clear, different sports, they probably should have different diet models
for
as
sure.
well.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's like the most important thing is like how you fuel as a tennis player might be different than how you fuel as like a football player. Right. So like it's very individualized as nutrition is, but I think trying to, just like your younger athlete, maybe like high school, college, just like the education around nutrition and how much it's correlated. Not saying I want to change their diet tomorrow. If like you have to be super clean and you can only eat this. But like meeting them where they're at, like a college athlete, obviously they're limited to like what they can cook and their budget and like the accessibility of all these things and their obligations to, travel and all these things. So just trying to get a little bit better from that, but the education around it. Like I remember coaching, being in that space and just like, if they ask a question, just provide the education so that when they're out with their friends or they're out on the road, like they're way more likely to make that choice because they know, okay, protein, I need to get this after I eat. I need a little bit more complex carb than simple carb. Like maybe this protein bar isn't the best because all the ingredients, right? So like just trying to educate them on like ingredient labels, why protein's important, why you can't skip meals, like hydration, like, and building from that. But it's just, I don't think not like talked about enough or like understood that like, okay, I'm super injured. Well, because my body's like poorly recovered, or I'm really sore. Okay, I didn't eat well or drink well or like recover well. Like it's so correlated. So just getting the proper education out to them.
So a big part of that you sort of slipped in at the end is how they feel when they're doing a lot of these things. I realized probably early into my 30s, after I would eat something, I'd be like, wow, I'm so tired. Mm-hmm. That never occurred to me when I was 20,
Same.
when I was 25.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was just that I wasn't aware of it or if my body has physically changed, maybe a combination of those two things. But getting that awareness of how stimulus, whether it's food, whether it's sleep, whether it's exercise, whether it's sauna, whether it is whatever it is, how it makes you feel and impacts your body and tuning that sense, to me is something I wish I had indexed on more heavily when I was younger, because I'm very attuned now. And
totally. Yeah. And like not perfect now, but at least we know, right? Like in college, like if I'm eating all the dairy and my skin's horrible, like I'm not realizing that it's the cheese bagel that I'm having before practice, which is like horrifying that I was eating that, but I was like, I had no idea, So just understanding that and then like, tapping into like paying attention to, okay, I'm really tired after I ate this meal. I'm going to try and eat this instead. And just like building from that.
So what role does the gut microbiome play in all of this?
A lot. So one of the sayings like in the functional medicine space is like a healthy gut, usually a healthy body. And it drives a lot of things. Like our gut is not just our gut. It's like meters long from where we like chew food to obviously where it comes out of. So there's a lot of things that have to like work together. But when I deal with patients and clients and athletes or what have you, I'm always asking those questions of like their gut microbiome. Like, how do you feel? Do you have a regular bowel movement? How's your sleep? Are you anxious? Do certain foods like make you bloated? Like there's a lot of questions, but tapping into treating that as opposed to like treating the symptom of like, if you have a headache, okay, take the Advil if you need, but like, that's not going to cure why you have the headache every single day. We got to tap into like what else is going on. And a lot of the time it can be like very much controlled or just like calmed down through their diet. We're very much on the standard American diet, which is a lot of like over consuming the wrong kind of foods, undernourishing your body with the right kind of nutrients. And as soon as we can like reverse that, they start to feel like, less bloated, less crampy, less anxious, hormones a little bit more in check, like way more energy, less inflammation, like, not as sore joints, like everything just starts to make sense. So, it's really like the driving force of like, it influences when they say like listen to your gut, like it is very much an accurate term because it influences how we think, what we say, the decisions we make, and if that's like compromised, then we're obviously not going to be at like our most optimal self from a cognitive function.
So speaking of most optimal self, and I'm by no means an expert in gut microbiome, this is a lot more your territory than
Me
mine.
neither, I'm still learning, but I can talk about it all day.
So something that I've read and seen in some different places is one thing that leads to a healthy gut microbiome is diversity of food, eating a lot of different things, a lot of vegetables, a lot of whatever it might be. And that seems to go slightly contradictorily to what people generally think of as dieting and nutrition. It's, you can only eat these specific things because all the rest of these things are bad for you. I know that's not necessarily the case at all, but can you reconcile those two things?
Yeah. So I'm very much in the camp of like, there's not one food that's like bad for you, right? So like if I were to eat one banana, that's not bad for me. But if I were to eat 12, okay, that's probably bad because all the sugar and carbs. But you could say the same thing with like a slice of pizza. Like if I had a slice of pizza, that's not bad for me. But if I have 2 pizzas every night, that becomes bad for me. So it's just like how much we're having and how often we're having those foods that are not as great as the other ones. Like we have nutrient dense foods, and that's kind of where we should be like aiming. Like some people might feel better on like a 70-30 split of like meat versus plants, right? Some people might feel better on like a 60-40 split of like 60% plants, 40% meat. But like I will say from like at least the camp I'm in, from a protein forward, like muscle centric approach, like trying to incorporate these high protein sources is like proven to keep muscle mass and protect your muscle as we age, which is what declines as we age. So it's really like, again, there's no like a one size fits all. Like I can't tell someone, oh, you're going to feel a lot better if you're vegan, or, oh, you're going to feel a lot better if you're carnivore. But like, there's definitely a split with how you feel. And it's just looking at your inflammatory markers, like when you get lab tested and stuff, because those are the things that hurt us in this country. It's inflammation. So we got to go more anti-inflammatory, and whatever that looks like for you, like that's what's best for you.
So do you have a favorite meal for high level athletes that you work with?
Not a specific food, but definitely like a philosophy of getting it like enough protein in them, which for any high level athlete, in my opinion, and people have different numbers that get thrown around, but I'm very much in the like at least a gram per pound of your body weight in protein. So I have a college athlete, women's tennis player now, like tired on court, like sluggish after hour, like hour and a half, 2 hours, and tapping into her nutrition is like we have her more on like a higher protein, complex carb, meal timing, super important, way more energy because she's just not eating enough. So it looks different for everyone, but definitely more of like a high protein, like complex carb, a little bit of fat sprinkled in, just like satiate you is probably like your best bet, and just whole foods, like as much whole foods as you can get.
Well, I think you'd probably find the Michael Phelps diet very interesting.
Oh my God, it's on like 7,000 calories,
well,
which like, I mean, his output is a lot.
His relationship with food is really strange now. So when he was swimming, it was so difficult for him to eat enough calories for him to replenish his body
to
and
keep
not
maintain. Yeah.
And so he was eating all this junk food, but that's the only way he could get enough calories. And now he kind of hates to eat because he had to force himself so much. Yeah. And it's a little bit sad on that front because I love food so much.
Yeah. I'm like, I'll never be sick to eat.
Yeah. What if it was work? Like, geez, I wonder how Joey Chestnut feels.
Yeah, I know. Is that the hot dog guy?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I'll probably one day do like a full series on him. That would be very fascinating.
I was going to say, and I thought you were going to say enter the competition. I was like, oh my gosh.
No, not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Get him on the pod. On the pod.
Exactly. So you talked a lot about protein. What specifically is so important about protein?
I mean, it's the nutrient that repairs, regrows, restores like your muscle mass. And as we age, that declines. So if we don't have enough of that, we're going to be frail and weak and not be able to like stay lean and strong, and really just like age pretty powerfully. So that's where like you can get it through different sources. It can look different for people, but trying to just like focus on getting enough. I think we're all pretty much underdosing ourselves, myself included sometimes, on a day-to-day basis. So our metabolism is like very much a muscle. You have to train it to get to this like threshold of protein. So don't go from like 30 grams to 130 tomorrow, but like work your way up to that. And I think you'll be pretty surprised and shocked of how much better that person feels with just like a higher protein, or like at least just thinking about it, trying to get it in every meal like approach.
Yeah. Something I really struggle with is balancing the amount of protein I need with not essentially like messing up my stomach, because if you're drinking a protein shake, you have whey protein, and that can be kind of rough on stomachs. You have plant proteins that are good, but they also, I think, I forget they're missing an amino acids.
Yeah.
And so that to me has always been a struggle. I eat like a ton of red meat, a ton of chicken, a ton of proteins or meats.
Yeah.
But it's still even a challenge because that is a lot of protein.
It's a lot. And like, it's going to take a minute for your stomach to be able to absorb and digest all that stuff, especially if you're not used to eating all that protein. So if someone doesn't have a lot of protein, maybe not go heavy on the red meat right away, but like start with the leaner meats and the fish and the eggs and the Greek yogurts and then cottage cheese, like the whey protein isolate if whey bothers your stomach, or beef protein. Like you can even do vegan, like that's still benefiting you, you know, but just like finding a way to figure out which protein sources work best for you. And then, maybe like changing that up if once your stomach starts to be able to build up this threshold of like absorbing and digesting. But if you don't have enough protein, your stomach's going to hurt with some protein because it can't break down the way it's supposed to.
All right. I like to end doing a couple hypotheticals.
Oh, God.
So the first hypothetical is, how would you maybe model a diet of a professional tennis player compared to a professional football player?
That's probably just going to be more of a caloric like input based on their mass. Like a football player is definitely bigger than a women's tennis player. So the same rules apply of like a gram per pound of your body weight, but we're going to find trickier ways to get more calories in the football player. And than the tennis player. And honestly, just like their lifestyle, like the tennis player is going to travel more than the football player. So, like figuring out ways what to order out and like tweaking that, and like how do we eliminate seed oils and sugars and things like that, where the football players, playing a game once a week, but then training, like he has more access to things. So, a lot of it is based on what their day-to-day looks like.
Amazing. Well, let's dive a little bit deeper into that tennis player example. So let's say they're on the road, maybe 40 weeks a year. They're going all over to these different places. What is the protocol that you're using to get them dialed in? Or what are the tools that you have available to you, whether it's just sourcing food or communicating with them to be able to find food? What is that relationship look like?
It's honestly being prepared. So getting like cleaner snacks to have on hand, because that's the biggest thing is like convenience. I think of just like grabbing and going like this random like protein bar because there's nothing else, or like just having like pack snacks with you and be somewhat prepared. So like when you're in between practices, like you know what you're getting. And then when you're on the road, like not missing on your first and last meal. Like your first meal is like you're breaking your fast. That's breakfast. Like you've got to prime your body for that. Last meal is dinner. You're about to go into an overnight fast. Everything else you can kind of like get by and figure out during the day. But that's what I would start with. And then if they're going out, like, okay, meal timing actually matters, like based on their practice schedule and their match schedule. Like that's where tennis is a little tricky, because like they're usually warming up and then they're going back to the hotel and then they're like going to do like a pre-warm up and then they're warming up again and then they're playing their match. So like, what does that look like time-wise from a nutrition standpoint? That's where I would like plan that out for them. So it's just like easy and simple. Like it takes the decision fatigue away from them of like trying to make so many decisions.
That makes so much sense. I mean, even with I'm closest to golf, so that's what I'm familiar with. On the course, players know 7th hole, I eat this.
Yeah.
They know 14th hole, I eat this. These are the times when I crash. This is when I should be getting calories into my body. Do you have any favorite snacks or healthier snacks
Yeah.
that you could recommend?
Yeah. So big fan right now of just like a clean protein shake. Like some of my buddies in Austin make beef protein. It's called Noble Origins. So like shout out to them. But like always having just a cleaner protein shake. Those like Chomps beef jerky sticks are great just to have. There's cleaner like protein bars. Like the Aloha bar is pretty solid. People still like that. It's like not a lot of ingredients, high protein. Those like almond butter packets. Like nuts are fine too. Just trying to stay away from like the empty calorie snacks, like goldfish, pretzels, like, the fruit snacks, just like random things that aren't really providing the most nutrients. But I have some staple fruit, like it's a whole food, just like some staples. And like to your point, okay, after a set, I'm going to have some fruit or I'm going to have this because like my glycogen levels are going and I need something to refuel that. So just having a system.
Amazing. Lauren, those are all my questions. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they potentially, contact you and stuff if they're interested in working with you?
So I run my own sports performance and like nutrition consulting business. It's called Embree Wellness. So my website is embreewellness.org. Email is embreewellness@gmail.com, but do a lot of like nutrition consulting, but also like meal planning and prepping, sports performance stuff, wellness talks like around the country, traveling a little bit in July to do some of those. So all kind of avenues from a sports and nutrition, like holistic health, finding the most simple path.
Amazing. I will provide all of your links in the description as well. Thank you so
much. Yeah, that was super fun. Thanks.
Perfect. All right.